Hi everyone, I'm Ale and I'm here at Microsoft Build joined by Marcus Perryman, who is a senior principal software engineer manager at Microsoft, and has been there for the last 26 years, and he's the go-to expert for all things Windows on ARM. I had the pleasure to join his talk yesterday and see Windows on ARM in action, so I'm really excited for him to share more of that with you. So, okay Marcus, tell us, what is Windows on ARM and how can developers get started developing on it?
So let's start with what is Windows on ARM. So Windows on ARM is a version of the Windows operating system that runs on ARM-powered hardware. And what we're trying to do, what we've been trying to do for some years now, is to make that possible for developers and also for customers to make the choice on which silicon they're using, independent of what software they want to get used each day. So making sure the apps work just great on both types of silicon. So that's my focus.
Awesome. And I believe you told me you've been working on it or involved with it since 2018?
Yeah, so it's been a while. We started off with the original ARM project. It was actually called Cobalt, and that was an ARM processor based on Qualcomm. And at that point we were realizing that in order to get the best experience out of the device, we need to make sure that the apps are native on ARM, because that brings out the battery life, the best performance, and so on. We've got an emulator, it's called Prism. It's great, it's been improved in Windows 11, the latest version, and the performance is fantastic. But still, if you want to get the battery life out of the device, out of your laptops, it has to be running ARM native. And that's a realization and a journey we've been on since 2018. So that's about, if I go on a little bit about middleware, because developers care about middleware. They come and they say, hey, I want to move to ARM, but they haven't got the tools, the developer tools and middleware. So we've been working behind the scenes to bring those things up. And then once we've got that and we're at that sort of parity between the silicon, then we go to the ISVs and say, come on, the developers, and say, come on, you've got the tools, go build for it. And that's what we've been doing the last sort of 18 months.
Awesome. So can you tell us about the most recent updates that you talked about briefly yesterday?
Yeah, I can do. So we announced this week two big things. The first one was the Windows on ARM laptops, the Copilot Plus PCs is the name we've got. That's a range of PCs that provide a particular specification in terms of the compute performance that's available. And the first of those are all powered by the Snapdragon X Elite processor, which brings the 45 TOPS of NPU, so AI acceleration, which is the fastest we've got in the market today. More PCs are coming, but today those are the ones we've got. So we announced that, and then we also announced the Windows 11 update that's coming, which has got making use of those things, so it's running lots of models. We talked about Recall, we talked about Windows Studio Effects, all these things that are offloading into the NPU to give us the advantage of both.
What would you say are the highlights of running Windows on ARM? What advantages do developers get?
Yes, of course. Well, we showed three partners. I'll use those as the examples if I can. So we showed Camo, so re-incubate Camo. Their application is about providing remote camera access. So if you're in Teams or in Google Meet or whatever, you can have a separate camera and they'll connect the two. So they now run on ARM. What they're able to do, because they're running on ARM, is they're able to actually make use of the NPU to provide gestures. So that they do a thumbs up thing, which is pretty cool. And they throw that all off onto the NPU, which means they get it at about 100 times the performance and far less battery for doing the same thing. That's one. The second one, we talked about Affinity Suite. So that's a design set of tools, a bit like Adobe, but they're sort of a different range. Now they need a lot of compute power. Now they came to Windows on ARM and were really surprised at just how quick the Snapdragon X Elite is in a laptop. So they were delighted. So they've done all of their apps and brought them across. So you get the power, you get the NPU. And the last one I'll talk about is Algorithm, which is a DJ app, so you can like separate out music and stuff. Very cool app, love it. Well, what they're doing is using the NPU in order to split the streams. So they've got the power of the NPU, and because the processor runs cool and for a long battery life, the laptops are ideal in those sound environments, recording studios and so on. And so they can actually build that into the devices. So you've got high power, you've got accelerated AI experiences, and you've got quiet, cool devices. That's the joy of these Copilot Plus PCs.
Awesome. And how can developers actually get started with them? How can they start developing on ARM?
So let's talk about the developer experience. We've been bringing all the dev tools, so that's MSVC, all the Visual Studio tools, Visual Studio Code, as well as the third-party tools like LLVM and Clang and GCC as well. It's now available. So you've got those tools. So you need to use the versions of those tools that will build for ARM, first of all. The middlewares we've been working on as well, get those. And then in most cases, it's flipped a bit. And you change from saying, I want to target x64 to saying, I want to target ARM64. And in the majority of cases, it will literally just work. So you can do a cross-compile, but ideally, we'd like you to build on ARM, for ARM. And we'll talk about that in just a second, I hope. A little bit more detail, something else I'm very excited about. But once you've done that build, then take your app, you need to put it on an ARM device, and you need to test it. And then you're pretty much ready. And you can go and build the ship channel. So it is a really easy on-ramp today.
Can you talk or name some of the tools that are already running natively on ARM?
Yeah, most of the ones you'll be aware of. I mentioned the compilers. Let's talk about middleware. So third-party middleware is my main thing. So Qt, we've been working with them. That's a cross-platform set of middlewares that helps you build libraries which will work on multiple platforms, including Windows. So they're bringing long-term support in 6.8, which is just great. We've done work on dev tools like CMake, that's now available, Node, and then some of the developer tools like Blender. I showed Blender.
Yeah.
Very excited about them. That was a big piece of work. And to see the performance of that and that running on native is just fantastic. There's many, many more. Too many for me to remember or to say now. But you should just check it out. And if there's one missing, we actually have a collaboration with a company called Linaro. That's between Qualcomm, ARM, and Microsoft. And we work together to enable middlewares that are in the open source space. By all means, reach out if there's something missing, and we'll see if we can use that collaboration to help bring it forward.
Now let's talk devices.
Yeah, let's do it.
Devices.
Yeah. Ask me the question.
What ARM devices do you recommend?
I'm glad you asked me that question. Something I brought along here, I might have showed it yesterday. This is the Snapdragon Developer Kit, and it's announced yesterday by Qualcomm. It's an absolutely fantastic device. I'm very made up about it. We've been working very hard for probably 18 months to make sure that this would actually release. And Snapdragon, or rather Qualcomm, have done a fantastic job of bringing this to market. They announced it. Oh, well, let me tell you a little bit about what's inside it. It's the Snapdragon X Elite processor, but it's a developer edition of that. So they actually squeezed an extra 2.5% out of the CPU. So it now will do a burst speed of 4.3 gigahertz on 2 cores. The base speed is 3.8 on this. Still fast enough. It's got a fan, so it means it's never thermally limited in this device. 32 gigs of very fast RAM and 0.5 terabyte of storage. Now the key things are for a developer, it's in that form factor. So it's thin, it sits on your desk, and it just kicks everything into touch. Got all the ports you want on the back, high-res monitors, 3 of them you can have. Key things, you can do kernel debugging now through the network port, and we've got a full VGA, VGA, goodness me, that's the 26 years speaking. Full HDMI port on the back of the device as well for versatility. I love this device, it's amazing. You can pre-order it now on the Qualcomm site, and they've announced a price of $899 and availability in a month's time. So yeah, this is the one I recommend, and you're not going to get out of my hands.
Can I touch it?
You can. That's enough.
Okay, and finally, how can developers that are building on ARM get in touch with you for
Sure. Well, we've
requests?
got a few ways. Probably the best way, if you need to connect with me, is through email. marcus.perryman@microsoft.com will work just fine. But you can also find me on LinkedIn and on Twitter as well.
What are 3 tips that you have for developers on ARM?
Well, the first one has to be go buy a device.
Yes.
And the device I would recommend would be that one. It's a pretty cool device. So that's number one.
That's number one.
If you're not already building for ARM, just try it. I mean, we were talking to some developers just recently, and they were all quite worried about taking on the ARM challenge.
Yeah.
But once they just tried it, it worked. and they were done. And they were very surprised in how quick it is to get that done. The third thing is probably more about a cautionary area to be aware of. So when you're doing this work of porting, it's the delivery and the maintenance of a different chipset is really important. So think about how are you going to update your build pipeline, how are you going to make that delivery happen, and what channels you're going to go through to get the planning right so that you're delivering and updating your app once it's gone live. So maybe those are 3 useful things to think about when you're considering adopting ARM.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks a lot. See you guys.
Bye.